Welcome to everybody. As you all know today, Abe George is going to talk to us. Abe George was my senior in college. Abe was in the batch of 1974. Um,
73.
Sorry,
73.
1973. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
4 years senior to me. And if anyone saw Abe George in college, I don't think they would have associated Abe with doing the marathon. I hope I'm right here, Abe. He was never on the sprint field. I never saw him anywhere near the Bagayam Oval, but here he is doing the marathon at 63 years of age.
Oh
So,
no, 60. I'll be 66 this year, Dial.
oh my gosh. Okay, I was trying to be good to you, Abe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dial,
Anyway,
you're absolutely right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So without too much ado, those of us who've tried to do any exercise would know, at least for me, once I've tried jogging about 500 meters, I'm already out of breath and I'm waiting for the finish line. And here, for someone at 66 years of age to be doing 26 miles, a marathon, is absolutely mind boggling. Abe, we really amazing. So, we're going to hear how Abe prepares for the marathon, and more importantly, what has made him raise money for the alma mater, CMC, and what it means to him, and why he's done this over the last few years, raising money for various projects in Vellore, um, so that um, so that money can be raised for people in need. So, Abe, thank you very much for sharing a bit, and over to you, Abe.
Thank you. So hello, friends. I'm, as you've gathered, a 65-year-old man, soon to be 66, and work as a GP in Norwich. And today, my wife and I were helping out because we are very actively. We're doing about 700, 800 vaccinations at our site in Norwich, and they ran short of volunteers. So we were doing the wiping chairs and directing people role, and have just got back from this very rewarding bit of work. My running credentials are zero. Dialan is absolutely right. I was never a sporty person, and a disappointment to my father, who was a career army officer and quite interested in all kinds of sport. Um, However, as a GP, I found that I was pushing a free podcast to my patients called Couch to 5K. And curiously thought, why not experiment and see what it was like myself? Now, Couch to 5K, for those who don't know it, is just a free podcast from the NHS, which actually has music as well as directions and actually does what it says. It gets you from your couch to running 5 kilometers. So you start in a very slow and graded fashion and move on from walking and running to actually running. And lo and behold, one day you're running 5 kilometers. And I did that in 2017. And having done that, you find that it broadens your horizons. You feel that there are more things to be done. Curiously, at the time, I was working both in Norwich and London. And in London, I worked for an agency that was closely associated with another charity, which I came into contact with because of the Grenfell fire disaster. So the Grenfell Tower caught fire, and many of the residents were housed in a large sort of sports complex. And the primary care services were given out by a combination of the Housing Association, that was the charity, as well as um, London Central and West, which was the agency that I worked for partly at the time. And so, having just found my new 5 kilometer legs, when I heard that the Notting Hill Housing, which was the charity, were running short of a marathon runner for the next year's marathon, which would be 2018, I thought I would, you know, try it out because I was getting old and I really did want to run something like that and thought that would be a hell of an achievement. And so I got in touch with them and they said, have you ever run a marathon? I said, no, and gave them exactly where I was. And they said, look, we let you get on board. And it's not as Ruth can testify, it's something like in the region of 300 or 330 pounds to get a runner. But they said, you can come on board, but if you decide to pull out, you're welcome to do that as well. So they gave me the option, possibly because of our association with the Grenfell fire people, you see. So that's how it started. And since that marathon went off successfully and made money for them, I ran again for them the following year in 2019. And then sort of thought I'd get in touch with Ruth, um, because Vellore has always been and continues to be have a very strong place in my heart, partly because of the fact that I studied there. I had a lot of extracurricular activities and had a lot of friends outside of the campus in Vellore who I still keep in touch with. I keep in touch with people in and out of the campus. My mother and brother-in-law had extensive bits of treatment there that I used to accompany them to Vellore. And so I've seen it as a patient's relative. I have accompanied my relatives and seen them, be healed, get healed miraculously. So the whole complement of things, right from the magic of, and of Ida Scudder to the present day situation where our own colleagues and juniors are, coping with really difficult situations is, worthy of a great deal of respect and love. And I feel that I'm privileged to be in a position where Ruth said, no, fine, we'll try it out. And, you know, with fairness to her, I mean, she could see what physical state I was in, and to allow me to, or actually to put money out to get me on as a runner and, generate funds for LCECU, which is the low cost effective care unit, was um, a leap of faith. But I'm truly grateful. And though it fell short of the target of a very ambitious one of £20,000, which somehow I thought that, because there were lots of alumni, I would get. But, we made something in the region of 7,000 or just over, which was still a hefty sum. And that, so I thought that, as long as I can keep running, why not run every year for Vellore? And Ruth picks which project to go for. And Ruth picked this particular one, which is the Jawadhi Hills project, which is, as you know, there is, and Ruth's presentation, I don't want to preempt it, but, there is a vast number of tribal people in different villages who live there, who are being supported with their health care. And it's essentially the money that we are generating this year goes towards the health worker salaries. Now, preparation for a marathon. A marathon is a specific, the distance, as you know, dates from historical times, and the Greek runner who expired after running that distance and providing the news of the battle. So marathon in Athens still are commemorated in a marathon that runs that distance. Um, However, training for it is gradually building up. So you have to, go into the science of running, which I did not at the time when I started. But now more and more, it is apparent that all the old sort of thinking that goes with the older person in running is being pushed back even further by American, because America is a country that has a large number of fit older people. And these people are pushing, the boundaries of what can be done at an advanced stage. So now when you look at marathons and their results, you actually come across good for age. Now, to be clear, I am not a runner even now. I am what they call a charity runner. A charity runner can do anything. They just have to finish the distance and generate money. That's all that the person has to do. But proper runners often challenge themselves to run in a particular time or run over a particular distance. And so um, you would find good for age, which is, you're put into an age bracket, and you'll be amazed that, people of my age can run marathons in 3 hours and 30 minutes. I would take, sort of double that time. 6 hours is more my, sort of best thing. I'm trying to get under 6 hours, but that's for this year. I plan to run a little more seriously and try and get under 6 hours, but that is a modest aim. However, there are many of my age who can run it in probably, approaching close to half that time. Um, However, footwear, nutrition, running form, keeping yourself healthy, getting adequate sleep, lots of different factors come into this. And so an older person, I feel, cannot run the same as a younger person. You modify your running style, you modify your pace, even look at the mechanics of what you're doing to try and economize and, you know, try and make the least amount of movement generate the maximum amount of distance. um, and don't go for very critical times, because sometimes, you know, you don't want to risk injury. Arthritis is, you know, osteoarthritis is something that all of us are going to encounter, and to try and push things, you know, you've got a distance to run. Now I'm training for one run in the year, which is, in this year it's going to be October the 3rd. And it's going to be run virtually because they haven't got around managing it in a way that, you know, where all the infrastructure that goes to running the London Marathon can be delivered in a manner, you know, that is safe and that is acceptable by international standards. Because remember, London is one of the major marathons, like, you know, the most prestigious one is the Boston Marathon, which doesn't take anybody, you know, so they would refuse me straight outright. They do want, you know, runners of good caliber. So the prestigious Boston Marathon, but you've also got more people-friendly ones. The largest one is the New York Marathon, for instance. But London is certainly up there among the best, and probably one of the most scenic. So you start off in Greenwich. I'm going to interrupt slightly because of the silence. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Great, great. Okay,
yeah.
fine. Yeah. Now, one of the things is where I'm not seeing anyone, neither can you see me, is that I'm sort of speaking into a screen. I'm not sure whether there is anyone there listening to this. But anyway, we land up in Greenwich, and there's a vast number of runners there. And I find that I'm extremely nervous. And because all of these guys are, and women, you know, men and women are actually warming up, doing all kinds of crazy things, and, you know, getting last minute nutrition. And many of them are wrapped up in bin bags, um, you know, because the bin bags are easy to, you know, keep body warmth. It's usually slightly chilly in the morning when you're there and you're waiting. You're one of the last lot of people to go off, because all of the other runners with good credentials are started off in different starts, and the charity runners come last. So we start off probably around more like 10 o'clock or something like that. And then, you know, it's massive. My first run that I did for the Notting Hill housing actually was comedy, because I was so nervous that I was sort of peeing every 5 or 6 minutes, more or less. And after the start, running about, you know, maybe a mile into the run, I realized that I needed to go to the loo again. And so there was this massive field that we were passing, and there were some loos there. And so I ran off the road, went into the loos, came out, and found that there was nobody around. It was almost as if everyone had disappeared off the face of the earth. There was not even an animal. You know, it was completely bare field, no one on the road, and absolutely nothing. And I started jogging in what I thought was the right direction, but I was running back to the start line, actually. And having run and thinking that, you know, well, I'm not seeing anyone here, and I'm still running. Anyway, then the start line came up, and I thought, oh God, you know, and then a camera was thrust in my face, and a loud voice boomed, "There's always one," you know. So, so they, they, I came on national television as the guy who ran back to the start line. So, and then I was turned around, and then I ran back again in the regular direction. But having said that, it is one of the most enjoyable things that anyone can do. The amount of goodwill, the amount of cheering, and someone had very correctly told me to print my name on my vest. And if you have your name on your vest, and even if people don't know you, they'll start shouting your name. And that is such a massive boost as you go along. You know, there's almost 1 million people on that route. And with many of them, you know, just calling out your name, little children holding out sweets along the way, you know, in plates that you can just, you know, pick up as you go along, large boards with, you know, circles and hands drawn on it. So you're supposed to, you know, high five it or, you know, thump it to get power according to them. So, you know, you just keep going down the line and sort of absorbing the goodwill of the people who realize that you're a charity runner, and they don't know which charity you're running for maybe, but they know that you're doing something that's for the good, and you're going to ache and hurt at the end of the day. So they really, give you a good cheer, and it goes on. So you progress along the line. It's the Cutty Sark, and then you go into, sort of the dock areas. And so wind back and forth. So of obviously Greenwich, the Maritime Museum, and the Cutty Sark, and then you keep going on. The Tower Bridge comes up, and that's a big thing to see. So you're in there, but then curiously you have to wind back and go through various dock areas, around the Canary Wharf area, and wind back and forth to make up almost 13 miles. And that can be a little bit daunting, because that's where the crowds slack off a little bit and you start feeling the pain. So around 8-10 miles, and they've got mile markers. And as you keep going, if you see a friendly face, that's great. My family sometimes come around, and they stand at various points, and I give them a friendly wave. They shout at me, and then I keep going. So when you come to the halfway mark, you're doubling back on Tower Bridge and you're heading in the right direction again. So, all the markers start coming up from the Tower of London, Embankment, going down the London Eye, Big Ben, Westminster, St. James, and then ending up at Buckingham Palace. It's massive. People are thrusting beers and asking you to take a sip, slices of pizza, bags of crisps, all kinds of things come your way. So it's massive. I mean, the feeling, the crowd, the amount of emotion that you feel, the sinking feeling if you feel that your legs are hurting too much. A lot of these things get pushed back when you have the crowds, and that was why, even though they said that you just had to finish the distance last year, it didn't feel the same. Running in the cold and wet in Norwich on the roads, working to an app that recorded your run and stopped working the moment you hit 26.2 miles, just did not feel the same. And unfortunately, it's going to be the same this year. So this year, though I love Norwich, I mean, Norwich actually allows me the various runs that I've done take me past the two rivers that run here. So one of them in particular, and I practice running by running to my workplace. So my surgery, I have a branch surgery as well. So one is about 4 miles distant and the other 3 miles. And so running back and forth is 6 miles to one and 8 miles to the other. So that's good practice. But you're ready for a marathon only if you've crossed about 18 miles in running. So you've got to do that and maybe do it 3 or 4 times before the big day. And so I'm only up to the 11-mile mark now. And so not great, but I've got about 4 months left. And I'm hoping to do a 3 or 4 18-mile runs before the big 26.2. I've got to say 26.2 really takes it out of me. And I take about 2 to 3 days of recovery, where I'll be, repairing myself with drinking protein drinks and generally resting. Um, but on the actual day of the marathon, as you come up to the marathon, you're doing the opposite. You don't want to be bulking up, so you're actually doing more of carbs. And then on the marathon day, you're making sure that you're well hydrated, as well as your sugar levels are good, because there has to be communication between the brain and your muscles, and the brain unfortunately feeds only on glucose. So making sure, so these are things that come with experience. And earlier on, you don't pay that much attention to your hydration, and you're nervous. um, you're wary about gels, glucose gels and things, but now they're part and parcel, and you kind of time them to to try and get them in at particular intervals. They're horrible little things to swallow. Actually, these guys experimented with like the Lucozade drink. They put them in pods of seaweed, which I thought was quite innovative. So there were stations where you could pick up these seaweed pods full of Lucozade drink, and so they kind of exploded in your mouth, and you got a fluid hit, and it was up to you as to whether you wanted to spit out the seaweed which is biodegradable, or you could swallow it because it would be fine chewed or swallowed as well. So yeah, marathon running has been really interesting. I had some pictures actually of, I mean, my mother was ill and passed away recently, and she had been ill for some time. But I managed to find a window to go to India. And during the trip to India, realizing that it was not a great time for me because of my mother's illness, one of the people who lived in the same building as my mother had run the London Marathon, and we had met, at the 2018 marathon. So I happened to bump into him, and he said, "I saw that you were running for the Jawadhi Hills. Did you know that the Jawadhi Hills had a marathon as well?" And actually, he's what they call an ultra runner. Ultras are people who run well over 26.2 marathon miles. So they train themselves to run much, much longer distances. And so apparently there was an ultra marathon that used to happen at the Jawadhi Hills. And he was one of them. And he introduced me to two other people who had run this Jawadhi Hills ultra marathon. Apparently, it was organized by a group in Chennai, run by a Belgian man. And then the marathon stopped when there was a natural sort of accident that happened. Some people had picnicked in the Jawadhi Hills, and there was a fire that took place which killed, I'm not sure how many people died in it, but then the Tamil Nadu government stopped marathons from happening there because they said that there needed to be a certain degree of infrastructure, ambulances, paramedics, and the like, that needed to be available for anything like that to happen, and it could not happen without it. So that stopped. But it was really strange that I could um, talk to people who had run an ultra marathon in the Jawadhi Hills, and speaking to them when I was preparing to run for the people who lived on the Jawadhi Hills, later this year. So, and this conversation took place in the Periyar River. We were actually in the river speaking about this because these guys were being, they're now moving into triathlon territory and they wanted to improve their swimming skills. So they had hired a good coach who said that he would teach them in the river. So I don't know whether any of you have been to Cochin or Ernakulam Cochin in Kerala. The airport, as you go towards Ernakulam or Cochin, you come across a place called Aluva, where there's a famous Shiva temple. And the Periyar River is really quite nice around there. And we picked a spot there. And we used to, for about 4 or 5 days, I used to see this group at about 5 a.m. in the morning, and we used to watch the sunrise and get coached in swimming by this coach in the river, just for about an hour or so. So it was one of those really surreal things that I experienced on this marathon journey for Vellore. Now, Vellore itself has changed. I don't know whether Dayalan's batch ever experienced the Jatka, which was the horse-drawn carriage that operated all the way from Katpadi to Bagaya. Sorry, not Katpadi, to the hospital. And there was a large Jatka stand, which was very close to the perimeter wall of the hospital. And the horses actually used to be there. So the hospital, the people there, and the people who used to come from all around, the structure and the way Vellore is fashioned now, the buses, the one-way systems, and the expanding population requiring the hospital itself to expand and move out, and various other establishments come up in Chittoor, Kanigapuram, all of those sort of things have now happened. And you can imagine that expansion is, definitely one of those things that you experience. However, Vellore is also all of those old things that are still there and timeless. The fort is, for me, something that's really big. To see those great slabs of stone cut by hand and placed one over the other without any cement is something that, I really gets me. And that the temple, which someone described as those two things on the side, like, hands extended to heaven. Those are the sort of things that really, so whenever my mother was admitted there, I would get up early morning and go to the police ground in the fort and run around there. So, you know, Vellore has, and all its surrounding places like Palamati, Amardi Forest and all that. And the newer places like, I don't know whether you've seen the Golden Temple, that amazing place. The VIT, the college that has made a name of its own, like their campus and their canteen and cafeteria, all of these things. My old stamping grounds at Karigari, you know, where I was with the, you know, the part of a very junior cog in the really good work that used to happen for, you know, treating leprosy. So all of these are indelible memories, and I'm sure that, you know, if God willing, I'm able to make it to my 50th alumni celebration, I'll be at Vellore and be, you know, hugging my batchmates once again. I do believe that. Thank you all for listening. If there are any questions, I'll take them at the end when Ruth allows.
Okay, thank you very much, Abraham, for sharing that. It's fascinating to hear that you met someone who'd run in the Jawadhi Hills. Yeah, we are really pleased that Abraham's going to run again this year. And he is raising funds in particular for our project in Jawadhi, which I'm going to tell you about now. So, Jawadhi Hills is a tribal area, 37 miles south of Vellore, with very little access to healthcare. 80,000 people live here, and their history, extreme poverty and poor road access mean that their health, literacy and development indicators are tragically low. Most people are small-scale subsistence farmers or land labourers, and due to poor conditions, many migrate to find seasonal farming work in nearby districts in the plains, and they take the children with them, who then sadly miss school for extended periods. Health problems include chronic malnutrition, TB, malaria, diabetes, high blood pressure, leprosy and HIV, and alcoholism is also a significant issue. CMC is working in this area to improve health and provide development opportunities. They run mobile clinics in the most accessible villages, and they also have the use of a building in a larger village for a daily clinic in the week.
That's the one that needs expansion.
Yes. They're doing a project, a model village project with USA, Friends of Vellore, working with 4 villages. Villagers have been helped to build their own toilets to ensure access to clean water and to begin new income generation schemes. So the villages are given a sum of money to use to embark on a new income generation project of their choice. The whole village takes ownership for the project, and the proceeds are deposited in a joint bank account. And various schemes have been adopted, including rearing of cows, goats, pigs, chicken, fish, rabbits, and in the middle you can see honey production. Farmers have been learning how to farm organically, and so they're now able to make their own fertilizer, and they're seeing increases in their crop productivity. CMC also run evening study centres and holiday camps for local children to supplement their schooling and build their confidence. And they've started coaching classes and means of encouraging young people showing signs of promise into nursing training or other allied health training. They help prepare them to take the entrance exams and then find scholarships to fund their places. And Friends of Vellore UK are currently funding 4 students from the Jawadhi Hills in nursing training. And these students come from families where the parents have had little or no schooling, and they depend on farming and manual labour for their livelihood. We're also funding 10 health workers. This is the bit of the project that Abraham's raising funds for. So these are young people from the Jawadhi Hills who CMC have trained, not to nursing standard, to a health aid level, so they can work in their local communities. They're increasing health awareness and bridging the gap between the local community and CMC's community health and development team. So these young workers are each assigned a cluster of villages which they visit to offer health advice and make referrals where necessary. And it's a key role because they're local themselves. The villagers trust them and they're more likely to seek healthcare when they need it. Here you can see Pumali, Gamathi and Durga, three of the health aides that we're sending money for. Between them, they look after 9, 7 and 5 villages respectively, each covering populations of between 1 and 2,000 people. And they're very grateful for the opportunity to earn an income and serve their local area. Community health workers encourage patients to attend the mobile clinic. They accompany the nurse during home visits, and they perform independent home visits to identify and refer patients with health problems. Follow antenatal and postnatal women, under 5s and chronic patients. They provide health education in homes and local schools on water, sanitation, hygiene and nutrition, and they motivate the mothers to immunise their children. These 10 health workers are now in their 3rd year, and in 2020 the cost of funding them came to just under £10,000. So Abraham has set this sum as a target for his marathon fundraiser. If you would like to support him and this very worthwhile project, the link is there to make a donation on his fundraising page, and I'll send it round when I send the recording to tonight's meeting as well. So that's it for me. Does anyone have any questions for Abraham or for me about the project? Diane.
Can I just ask Abe, George? Abe, apart from just practicing or going on runs, do you have to do any other exercises or any other resistant workouts to develop other muscle groups other than just the ones you use for running before you do a marathon? That's the first question. And the second question is, what does it feel like on the morning after the marathon?
I can answer the second one really easily because, as I said, for me, it's a painful exercise. I mean, my GP is not at all in favor of running because she belongs to the old school that, you know, the older you get, the more easy you should take life and indulge only in things related to walking or cycling. You know, like you work on a pedal or you just walk at a reasonable pace, but not consider running because it was always thought to be too taxing on joints and things like that. But in actual fact, now you can see for yourself that the older runner has taken to the streets in larger numbers, so that if you follow the science well and you know your limitations, and everyone has their own limits. I mean, the height of current excellence is a man called Eliud Kipchoge in Kenya, who runs, albeit not under marathon normal conditions, but he could run a marathon in under 2 hours. Now, that is an amazing feat. He's running basically at the speed of a fast cycle for the whole distance. But for me, it's a painful exercise after 8 to 10 miles. It's mind, because I have to cope with pain. I have to remember all the things that I, talk to myself about. So the different muscle groups, so it's not just the leg and thigh and the buttock areas that you're concentrating on. Running form means how you swing your arms, how you position your head. So little things like, you have to keep your head up even though you're feeling tired. And the dictum is, like imagine a string going from the top of your head to the ceiling and holding it in place there. So you've got to keep your head up. Then, as most medical people know, that you need to maintain an open airway. So the moment you bring your head down, you're putting a kink in your airway, really, isn't it? So lifting your chin up, but not so high that you're looking up into the sky, but you're looking maybe about 50 or 100 yards ahead, keeping your chin up, opens out the airway, and so you can actually get in better. Breathing technique is quite reasonable. So there are different things that you need to concentrate on, but the core muscles are well recognized. And so something called cross training, which is basically, I talked about the river and swimming. So swimming, cycling, running is a good combination. I have a folding cycle, so I see my patients on my folding cycle. I drive to work, or now more recently over the last year or so, I run to work. So I run to work and have a folding cycle in my workplace. So my home visits are done on the cycle. Curiously, during all of this lockdown and the rest of it, people still needed visiting. And so all we do is take PPE along with us, but all the visits have happened exactly as it did before. So maybe because in rural Norfolk, the numbers are smaller, but in London, I can't see that happening, but certainly in smaller places, this continues to happen. But cycling through work is, it helps me in other ways. Some time ago, I went for, I don't know whether many of you have been to the Earl's Court exhibitions, and I picked up one of those vibrating plates. So I've modified this vibrating plate experience with, you can stand on one leg on a vibrating plate, or you can use something called a Bosu ball, which is basically a hemisphere with a flat board on it. So imagine the hemisphere is actually resting on the ground and it has a flat board on it on which you attempt to stand. So you can imagine how much of a core muscle workout you'll get when you do that. So I don't possess one of those, but I do have this vibrating plate that I sometimes use. And so if you stand on one leg, or do little various innovative combinations, you can actually exercise various muscle groups, upper body and the rest of it. I've now, more recently, because I've been looking at some running magazines, acquired a kettlebell. So, and actually I had in my presentation and pictures, my most recent acquisition is a skipping rope. And curiously, I found that I could still skip. So I have a skipping video where I was trying to do it at the workplace. So now we wear theater blues at our workplace, and it kind of lends itself. So if you wear trainers and theater blues, you can, triage a few patients, see a few patients, take a little break. And if you have a place where you can actually do a bit of a skip, you have skipping ropes that connect to your phone and can record the number of skips and calories and things like that. So I have one of those. So yeah, it's exercising different muscle groups the whole idea is to make it a more efficient running machine.
I'm highly impressed by how scientific, Abraham, you've been. I actually did run a marathon myself when I was some 10 years younger than you, but all I did was gradually increase the amount I ran. I didn't know anything about, well, I did ask the dietitian about diet, but all these accompaniments you had, your skipping ropes and your various other apparatus, I just didn't have. However, I think, Dylan, you asked about how you were after the marathon. The last mile of running the marathon, it was Glasgow Marathon, 1983.
Right.
The Glasgow Marathon, the last mile, my right knee was killing me. I really, had it been any longer than a mile still to go, I would not have finished. Unfortunately, the very next day, I had to fly down to London to a conference, and I was a cripple. I really could not, I had to go, obviously, even to go on the plane, I was a cripple. And I don't know how I managed to get through the conference because my leg was killing me. And that, I have to say, that knee has never been the same since. And this is the concern about a lot of marathon runners. They do get arthritis. I think Abraham did make a reference to that.
Yes, that's true. Knees in particular tend to be, you have to protect them very much. And so right now, when you look at run mechanics and the older person running, you can see that the really young people bound when they run. They jump up and drop onto the ground. And that impact can actually be about 3 times your body weight impact. So clearly, an older runner with arthritis in their knees cannot run in that bounding fashion. So I've developed my own style of a shuffle sort of run. So it's more, it's not so much bounding as, the foot lifting. And again, the impact is not on heel or any particular part. I try and make it a mid-foot impact so that it's spread out a little bit. So spreading out the impact, making smaller steps, and not bounding. See, these are some of the modifications that came in to try and save the knees and hips. And when you work on these over a period of time, while at the same time your quads keep strengthening, somehow the knee pain seems to have regressed. I mean, I actually ran the first marathon with I had a brace, a proper brace on my knee. And I ran with the brace right through the marathon. But later I found that I don't need it. I don't need it anymore. So I find that my knee pain has now resolved with the various little bits. There's also something that might not have been there before, which is now very commonly used. It's something called a foam roller. And the foam roller is integral to running a long distance, because all those tired muscles, which they talk about micro bleeds in the muscle and things like that, and these somehow rolling on it. There is a police sort of torture that people used to talk about, where the victim was put on a bed and hard rolled with a log over their muscles, so that a policeman would stand on a log of wood, which would be rolled across the thigh or the leg, and actually cause intense pain because of the pressure. This is a minor variation of it. You're using your body weight on a foam cylinder, which is actually hard. I got a hard core. So you put the foam cylinder on the ground and you use your body weight over it to massage your muscles. And this curiously seems to reduce muscle aching considerably. So once I acquired a foam roller, the extended, the amount of pain and what you described about the stiffness that comes with trying to board a flight and sit down in a normal chair, all of those things I seem to have worked out.
Thank you all very much. Special thanks to Abraham George. Thank you very much, Abe. Just to end, regarding Jawadhi Hills, in addition to what Ruth had said, one of the problems with Jawadhi Hills is, at the moment, Chad sends a team out for regular clinics during the day, and they provide daytime clinics. But what they don't have is 24-hour health care. So any emergencies after 6 or after dark, they have to go to the local primary healthcare center, which is a long way away and takes them a long time, and at times can be detrimental and could result in losing lives. So what Chad is hoping to do is to build a 24-hour small health service center there, and they're raising money for that. And FOV UK and the board in America are hoping to raise enough money to fund that, or to be able to contribute towards that, which will mean building accommodation for doctors and nurses to stay at night, and a small setup where there's maybe a small delivery room and a small theater going forward. And that's the way they want to develop that service. And that's what we're hoping to raise money, including what Abraham George is doing. Yes, Anne?
Just 2 minutes. I have actually been out with the district nurses up in Jawadhi, and you have to walk. There are no roads, so you're walking across the paddy fields and that. And we walked for 45 minutes to get to the first village where they were working, and then from there we moved on to a second village, which again was an hour's walk to get to it. This is one reason why they need so many health workers, because it's not physically possible. It's all walking for them. And they can only cover two villages in a day. The other thing is that I wrote 2 stories, one about a boy who came, a 12-year-old, who came to CNC from Jawadhi, and his mother had carried him 10 miles to get to the road, to get a bus to come down to Vellore. And also a pregnant woman, when she was in labour, she had walked 45 minutes to the road to come down to Vellore, because there was no clinics up in Jawadhi itself. They really do need, and the van from Chad, it's 2 hours drive up to Jawadhi's, so that every day they're spending 4 hours just driving up and down, and they have to leave by 4 o'clock because they have to get down before it gets dark, because it's a Gart road with about 4 hairpin bends on it, and you can't do it in the dark. So there are very good reasons why they need a clinic up there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good. Okay. So once again, Abe, thank you very much. And thank you all
Thank
for
you.
attending. Next month, we'll have our last connect before we break up for the summer. It's going to be Mike Keatley. Mike has retired as Professor of Surgery at Queen Elizabeth Hospital and University of Birmingham. And following his retirement, has been doing a lot of work with CMC Vellore, with their Department of Surgery there. Mike was a colorectal surgeon and Professor of Colorectal Surgery. So he's going to be telling us about his experience working with Vellore and the surgical department there after his retirement. Mike is also one of our trustees on the board of FOV. So thank you all very much. Special thanks to Abe and to Ruth. Thank you, Ruth, for organizing this once again, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.